Let's talk about one of the most confusing experiences in relationships, when an avoidant partner leaves. If you've been there, you know the whirlwind of emotions that follows. Suddenly, you're left wondering, what happened? Did I say the wrong thing? Should I have been more patient? If I just give them time, will they realize what we had and come back? That's the story many of us tell ourselves, right? That maybe if we wait long enough, if we prove our love one more time, if we say just the right words, they'll walk back into our lives. It's a belief fueled by hope, by longing, by that deep ache to not let go of what once felt so real. But here's the truth, and it's not easy to hear. When someone with an avoidant attachment style leaves and actually finds peace in your absence, they're not coming back. And I don't mean the messy, dramatic breakups filled with arguments and slamming doors. I'm talking about the quiet goodbyes, the kind where they detach slowly, distance themselves emotionally, and finally step away without looking back. Why? Because for them, leaving isn't just about escaping the relationship. It's about regaining a sense of calm. Once they convince themselves that stepping away is what brings peace, they rarely revisit that decision. In their mind, closeness equaled pressure. Distance equals relief. And I know how painful that is to accept, because while you're sitting in the silence, replaying conversations, holding on to memories, they've already reframed the story in their own mind. They've told themselves that leaving was the right choice, and that belief gives them closure, whether you agree with it or not. So before we dive deeper into this topic, I want to challenge you with a question. What if waiting for someone who has already made peace with your absence is actually keeping you from finding your own peace? This conversation isn't about blame, and it's not about shaming anyone with an avoidant style. It's about truth, and the truth can set you free if you're willing to see it for what it is. When most people picture a breakup, they think of shouting matches, tears, or slammed doors. But when someone with an avoidant attachment style leaves, it often looks very different. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's quiet, so quiet that sometimes you don't even realize the relationship is ending until they're already gone. Here's the thing about avoidance. Closeness, for them, can feel suffocating. What feels like intimacy and connection to you can register as pressure or even danger to them. The more emotionally close they get, the more they fear losing their independence. So instead of leaning in, they start to pull away, and it's rarely impulsive. Their decision to leave is usually something they've been rehearsing in their mind for weeks, maybe even months. Every time there's a disagreement or a moment of tension, they file it away as evidence that distance equals safety. In their head, they build a case, and by the time they finally act, when they actually walk out or stop answering your calls, they've already convinced themselves it's the right choice. For them, the breakup is closure, not a question mark. This is why it can feel so shocking for the partner left behind. While you might still be processing the last conversation, trying to figure out how to fix things, the avoidant has already played this scenario out in their mind 100 times. By the time they leave physically, they've left emotionally long before. And here's the hard truth. Once they settle on the belief that distance brings peace, they rarely go back to renegotiate that decision. Because in their mind, reconnecting would mean stepping back into what felt suffocating. So if you've ever wondered why avoidants don't come running back after some time apart, this is the reason. Their exit isn't spontaneous. It's a carefully calculated move. They don't leave hoping you'll chase them. They leave because, in their perspective, that's what protects their freedom and stability. And that's why understanding how they leave is the first step in freeing yourself from waiting on someone who has already moved on. So let's talk about what this really means for you. Because here's the truth. When an avoidant partner leaves, it's tempting to wait. To sit there replaying every word, every moment, thinking, maybe if I just give them space, they'll come back. Maybe if I prove my love one more time, they'll realize what they lost. But I want you to hear this clearly. It is not your job to wait by the door, like love is some package guaranteed to arrive. An avoidance leaving is not a reflection of your worth. And that's something most people struggle with. We think, if I were more attractive, more patient, more lovable, they wouldn't have pulled away. But avoidance isn't about you. It's about them. It's rooted in their wiring, their fears of intimacy, their belief that closeness equals danger. You could pour out every ounce of love you have, and it still wouldn't rewrite the story they're telling themselves. Here's another hard truth. It's not your responsibility to heal them. That burden doesn't belong to you. Too often, we step into the role of rescuer, convincing ourselves, if I love them hard enough, if I hold on long enough, they'll finally feel safe and stay. But healing doesn't work that way. You can't do the work for someone who hasn't chosen it for themselves. And if you keep trying, you'll slowly abandon yourself in the process. Think of it like knocking on a locked door that's clearly marked closed. The more you knock, the more energy you waste. Meanwhile, behind you, other doors, doors of peace, growth, and healthy love, are wide open. But you can't walk through them because you're still pounding on the one that shut itself. Silence, as painful as it feels, is an answer. When someone chooses not to respond, when they drift away without effort to repair, that's your clarity. Don't chase closed doors, because love that requires you to beg, push, or constantly prove yourself is not love that will last. Instead, redirect that energy back into yourself. Ask, what do I need right now? What kind of relationship do I truly deserve? Because the moment you stop waiting for someone else to validate your value, you reclaim your power. And the most freeing realization of all, you were already worthy before they left. You still are. And you don't need their return to prove it. Now let's get really honest. How do you know when an avoidant partner isn't coming back? Because the uncertainty can be the most painful part. You sit there wondering, maybe they just need time. Maybe they'll miss me eventually. But the reality is there are signs, clear, painful, but freeing signs, that they've already closed that chapter. The first one is this. Emotional detachment doesn't feel like loss to them. For many avoidants, it actually feels like peace, even relief. Where you might feel heartbreak and longing, they may feel a sense of calm. Why? Because closeness for them has always felt threatening, like it was slowly draining their independence. So when they step away, they experience space not as loneliness, but as safety. Another sign, they thrive in distance. While most of us heal and grow in connection, through open conversations, vulnerability, or reconciliation, an avoidant feels most comfortable maintaining space. Sustained intimacy is exhausting for them, and the distance allows them to breathe. That's why when they leave, they rarely rush to come back. They're not in a hurry to rebuild what to them felt overwhelming. Then there's their coping mechanism, rationalization. Instead of wrestling with the deep pain of disconnection, they convince themselves it was necessary. You'll hear phrases like, I lost myself in that relationship, or it just wasn't working anymore. These aren't always lies. They're the stories they tell themselves so they can feel justified and avoid dealing with the uncomfortable emotions underneath. And here's the part that often stings the most. Their relief can look like indifference. When you see them moving on, not checking in, not showing the pain you expected, it doesn't mean they never cared. It means avoiding emotional labor, those heavy conversations, the vulnerability, the repair work, feels easier than leaning back into closeness. That relief to them is a kind of self-preservation. So if you're waiting, thinking silence is temporary, ask yourself, does their distance feel like avoidance, or does it look like peace? Because if their absence gives them relief, if their story is all about why stepping away makes sense, then that's your answer. They're not planning to return. As hard as it is, recognizing these signs isn't meant to break you. It's meant to free you. The more you see their behavior clearly, the less you'll waste energy chasing a closed door. And that clarity is the first step toward reclaiming your own peace. Here's one of the hardest truths to accept when dealing with an avoidant partner. While you're grieving, they're already stabilizing. And this difference creates what I call the emotional gap. It feels like you and your ex are living in two completely different worlds after the breakup. You're in pain, wrestling with memories, asking what went wrong, while they seem calm, steady, maybe even relieved. Why does this happen? It's not because you didn't matter. It's because of how avoidants process emotions. When you love someone deeply, longing comes naturally. You miss their voice, their presence, the little rituals of connection. But longing requires vulnerability. It demands that you admit, I need you, I miss you. And for avoidance, That level of openness feels unsafe. So instead of leaning into the ache, they shut it down before it even surfaces. Their version of relief after leaving isn't necessarily about not caring. It's about protection. They protect themselves from emotional exposure by creating distance, by rationalizing the breakup, by convincing themselves that detachment equals strength. And here's the tricky part. To the outside world, and especially to you, that protection can look a lot like indifference. You might think, wow, they must not have loved me at all, if they can walk away so easily. But in reality, their relief is less about you and more about their own fear of being too open, too dependent, too vulnerable. Meanwhile, on your side of the emotional gap, you're feeling everything. You're carrying the weight of love, loss, and the unanswered questions. It's like you're standing in the middle of a storm while they're sitting in a quiet room. And that contrast can feel crushing, like you're the only one who truly cared. But here's what I want you to take from this. Their detachment doesn't define your value. Their calm is not proof that you were insignificant. It's proof of how differently they're wired to handle closeness and loss. So instead of chasing their silence, acknowledge the gap for what it is, a mismatch in emotional coping, not a measure of your worth. And the beautiful part is this. While they may stabilize through avoidance, you have the chance to heal through connection. Connection with yourself, with others, and with God if that's part of your journey. That healing will build resilience, strength, and clarity far deeper than the temporary relief that detachment provides. When you've loved someone who pulls away from closeness, it can feel deeply personal. You might ask yourself, why can't they let me in? Did I do something wrong? But here's the truth. Their avoidance isn't really about you. It's about the story they've carried since childhood. For many avoidant partners, intimacy feels unsafe because of early life experiences. Maybe they grew up with inconsistent caregiving. Sometimes their needs were met, sometimes they weren't. Maybe they faced neglect, or they learned very young that depending on others led to disappointment. Over time, they developed a survival strategy. If I take care of myself, I can't be let down. And that's where the deep attachment to independence begins. For them, independence equals emotional safety. This means the closer you try to get, the more you show up with love, warmth, and consistency, the more triggered they can feel. To you, closeness is connection. To them, closeness can feel like pressure, even danger, because it threatens the protective walls they've built for years. Imagine it like this. You're offering a comforting embrace, but they're experiencing it as being trapped. Not because your love is wrong, but because their nervous system is wired to resist it. And here's the heartbreaking paradox. Your love, your emotional presence, the very things you hope will reassure them, can actually make them more uncomfortable. Not because you're too much, but because their defenses interpret closeness as risk. So when they pull away, when they seem distant, it's not a judgment of your worth. It's not proof that you're unlovable. Their avoidance is self-protection, an automatic reflex they learned long before you came into the picture. Think of it like armor. It keeps them safe, but it also keeps you out. The key takeaway here is this. Don't internalize their walls as a reflection of your value. You could be the most patient, loving, and supportive partner in the world, and still, their avoidance would surface. Because it's about them, not you. If you've been on the receiving end of this, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not too much. Your desire for connection is not a flaw. It's human. Their struggle with intimacy is not a rejection of your heart. It's a reflection of their own unresolved wounds. And understanding this truth is the first step in freeing yourself from blame and stepping into healing. Let's talk about one of the hardest parts of walking away from an avoidant partner: closure. Most of us hope that, at the very least, we'll get a conversation, an explanation, something that ties the story together so we can move on. But with avoidance, closure almost never looks the way we imagine. The truth is, silence is closure. And I know that feels unfair. We want that sit-down moment where they finally admit what went wrong, or at least validate our pain. But avoidant partners rarely give that. Why? Because closure requires vulnerability, honesty, emotion, accountability. And those are the very things they've spent a lifetime trying to avoid. For them, silence feels safer than truth. So instead of heartfelt conversations, you might get polite, vague responses. A short text like, "I just need space," or "It's not you, it's me." Maybe they say something that sounds reasonable but leaves you spinning with questions. And when you try to reach out, when you hope for clarity, you're often met with deflection, delay, or no response at all. That lack of engagement can make you feel like you're going crazy, like maybe you're the one asking for too much. But here's what I want you to understand. Every deflection is an answer. Every unanswered message is an answer. When someone refuses to engage with your heart, that is their decision speaking louder than words. It's not the closure you wanted, but it is closure. And here's the shift. You don't actually need their words to move forward. Closure isn't something they hand you. It's something you claim for yourself. You create closure when you accept that their silence, their vagueness, their distance is the final chapter. Think of it this way. Waiting for an avoidant to suddenly offer deep emotional truth is like waiting for a locked door to open without a key. You can knock, you can hope, but at some point, the silence on the other side is the message. So instead of exhausting yourself trying to pull answers out of someone who can't or won't give them, shift the focus inward. Ask yourself, what does closure look like for me? What boundaries do I need to protect my peace? Because here's the reality. Your healing doesn't depend on their explanation. Your healing depends on your decision to stop chasing answers in closed spaces and start choosing yourself. Here's something we don't talk about enough. Every time you wait for someone who walked away, you're not just waiting for them, you're abandoning yourself. And I know that's tough to hear, but think about it. When your days revolve around the hope that they'll text back, or the fantasy that maybe one day they'll realize what they lost, you're putting your own life on pause. You're telling yourself, my happiness depends on them. And that's not self-love. That's self-abandonment. Now here's where fear shows up. Fear whispers lies like, you'll never feel this connection again. Or, what if they're the only one who truly understood you? That fear keeps you tethered to the past when in reality it's only an illusion. The truth is, love that disappears when things get real was never the kind of love that lasts. Real self-love begins the moment you decide to respect yourself enough to stop chasing what's no longer mutual. It's about drawing a line and saying, I deserve more than silence. I deserve more than half-hearted love. I deserve presence. Because here's the thing. True love is not just chemistry, or sparks, or someone saying the right words once in a while. True love is consistent. It's showing up even when it's hard. It's being vulnerable, open, and emotionally available, day after day. When you keep waiting for someone who's already left, you rob yourself of the chance to find that kind of love. And maybe the deeper truth is this. The love you're actually waiting for isn't even from them. It's from yourself. From the version of you who finally chooses to stop begging for breadcrumbs and starts demanding the feast you deserve. So ask yourself, are you honoring yourself? Or are you betraying yourself by holding on to someone who's already gone? Because every time you choose self-respect, you build the foundation for a love story that actually lasts. And it begins with you. Choosing self-respect isn't about bitterness, and it's not about revenge. It's about reclaiming your power, stepping back into your worth, and reminding yourself that the love you truly want, deep, mutual, vulnerable love, cannot exist without presence. And if they can't give that, then they were never the one. The real question is, are you ready to stop waiting for them and finally start choosing you? So here's the truth, plain and simple. If someone chose distance over growth and silence over honesty, they are not coming back. And even if they did, would it really be the kind of love you deserve? Think about that for a second. Because love that avoids, love that hides, love that disappears the moment it feels uncomfortable, that's not the kind of love that builds a life, is it? You deserve a love that stays, a love that doesn't run when things get messy, a love that meets you in the middle of your vulnerability and says, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You deserve a partner who values depth, who isn't afraid of honesty, and who sees intimacy as safety, not a threat. But here's the part that often stings. Closure will almost never come from them. It's not in a text message, not in a perfectly crafted explanation, not in one last conversation that finally makes sense of it all. Closure is what you decide for yourself. It's the moment you say, "This is over. I'm not waiting anymore. I choose to move forward." That moment is yours, and no one else's. Healing begins the second you stop chasing what's already gone and start turning that energy inward. Imagine if all the hours you've spent analyzing their behavior, rereading old conversations, or waiting for the phone to buzz, what if all that energy was invested into yourself instead? Into your passions, your health, your friendships, your growth? That's where real healing begins, and I want to leave you with this. Let the door close. Don't keep peeking through it, waiting for footsteps that will never return. Close it, lock it if you must, and turn around to face your own life again. Because when you do, you'll realize that this wasn't just about losing someone. It was about reclaiming yourself. At the end of the day, love is not about proving your worth to someone who cannot see it. It's about recognizing your own worth so clearly that you refuse to accept less. So choose yourself. Choose the kind of love that feels steady, open, and real. And if that means walking away from someone who couldn't give it, then that's not a loss. It's freedom. The final question I'll leave you with is this. Are you ready to stop waiting for them? And finally step fully into the love story you've been worthy of all along, the one that begins with you? If you find this video useful, please subscribe, like, so you don't miss out on future content.